Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Roundup. I am your host, David Fox. With me, as usual, is UberHansen, and we are here live to talk about kinda sort of football, but not real football, so don't freak out too much about it. It's okay, the sky is not falling, things will be fine. Which I feel like is going to be my general refrain through most of this show for some of you. Some of you are probably already thinking that, but some of you are probably already annoyed and are ready for the season to both start and end. But before we get into any of that, Uber, how are you?
Yeah, I mean, I watched as much football as I could this weekend. It was both ugly and beautiful at the same time because all football is beautiful. I wish I had Greg Thompson's tweet up. Gosh, what did it say exactly? It's something like football's like sex. Even if it's dirty and sloppy, it's still wonderful. Something like that. And that's how I felt all weekend. So, yeah, now on to the second week of preseason.
See, that's how I feel. I often compare America and pizza together because even when it's all fucked up, you still love it.
Yeah. I like it.
Okay. Also, I'm gonna flip your usual Friday night question on to you. What are you drinking tonight?
Oh, tonight is a little Sam Adams summer ale. I did decide to imbibe this evening. It's good. It's tasty. I needed a beer after a long, long day. I guess.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I needed a beer.
I feel like I tried that once, like years ago, and I expected a lot more out of it, and just did not enjoy it for some reason. I've had regular like Sam Adams lager is good. There was one they made a while back called Hopscape, which like super intense, bitter, hoppy flavors, but also like surprisingly good.
Yeah.
But apparently I was one of a select few that felt that way about that beer because they didn't have it for very long. Yeah, such is the case. So now that we are all in here, we're going to talk about this preseason game, what we liked, what we didn't like. We'll go through all three phases of the game to talk about all different things that happened. We'll also get into some news because there's some minor Bills news along with some really funny, specifically New York Jets news, and we're just gonna go from there. And before we get all into that, we got some business to take care of, and we'll have our wonderful friends Greg and Aaron from the Cover One flagship show tell you about all of that.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Thank you, Greg and Aaron, for your impeccable read every single time. Very on point, accurate, every single time, and I appreciate that. We'll get into some comments right now. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Mike Malley Guitar. I am going on 8 years sober. I was a nasty drunk for years. You know what? Good for you. We always
impressive.
Appreciate sobriety, and especially long-term sobriety. That takes a lot of strength and power. So kudos to you, Mike Malley. RJ Melville, longtime supporter of the show. The MVP of the game is John Perry. I'm not sure if Sean McDermott has ever won 2 challenges in a season, let alone a single game. So I'm gonna take this moment. I'm gonna kind of take a moment to savor this because I think this may be the first and only time that RJ has ever said anything positive about a referee in the several years that I've done this show. And He's totally right. Which brings up an interesting point, which is that the Bills hired John Perry from ESPN, I believe. He was like the rules analyst from ESPN, and they ended up hiring him as basically their like designated challenge guy. So, and honestly, not only were both of those challenges won, but they were like genuinely good challenges, because that first one was that catch, which I was like, that's a great catch, and then I was like, it honestly, it took a couple of different angles for me to like really see like, oh, that is not a catch. He did not get that second foot down. I was like, oh, that's a really good spot by the people who are looking for that sort of thing. So, hey, if there is a one like genuinely great thing that I can take out of that game for something that I think will kind of carry over to the regular season, that is actually genuinely something I could say. Yeah,
that honestly, that might end up being a really big deal this season. I will say though, to RJ's point, Sean McDermott has 3 seasons where he's won 2 challenges or more. Ooh. And last season, he won 3 challenges, but all of them happened in January of 2024.
Seriously?
One against the Dolphins, one against the Steelers, one against the Chiefs.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
He also, I feel like he doesn't challenge that much anyway. And I don't know if there are, like, challenges that, if there are coaches that challenge more often than others or whatever, but... Yeah, it has often seemed like, Sean McDermott is not very good with challenges. But
he isn't. Yeah.
If that changes even a little bit, I'm all for it. So, we'll get to some other guys. Joe DeRosa of Under Review. Go watch Under Review. 7:30 p.m. You are going to be on that show.
I will be on it, tomorrow
night, as you often are at this point. David Spears is the MVP of the preseason. So here's the thing.
Honestly, what is this? Because this appeared out of nowhere. I don't remember this last week.
So here's the thing. Probably about a month ago, I was like, it's time. I need to get a haircut. I need to get the beard trimmed down professionally. It's time. But I'm going to Tennessee for a trip at the end of the month. And I'm going to be going to see an old friend of mine. But before that, I'm going to be going to the premiere of a documentary that I helped fund. So I was like, if I'm going to want a haircut and a beard trim before I go on the trip too. So if I just wait and hold out long enough, I could just do that. But I also live in Southwest Florida, and this is incredibly irritating and bad, and I am so over it at this point. And I am like, so the hair appointment has been made for not this upcoming Friday, but next Friday, and that's assuming I actually make it until then, because I am high key losing my mind with this. It's very irritating. Anyway, that's enough. That's enough talk about that. Archer says you are 100% correct with that statement. Oh, I know. I'm right about that. Mike Malaguitar says, I thought that Samuel and Shakir looked very good. Granger looked nice too. I think we'll end up talking about all 3 of those guys at some point. Ralph Wilson Sr. makes a great point. Both challenges that he won got the ball back immediately. A critical point, which probably means we won't see like a lot of more challenges out of McDermott necessarily, but those were clearly moments where he was like, yeah, this is worth doing. This is something that's something worth challenging, right? You don't want somebody who's just like throwing a challenge flag for no friggin' reason. Well, which I've seen before. Some coaches do that.
They brought up the rule change, which I actually didn't even realize this was a rule change, that if you win one of your first 2, you get the third challenge this season. That where it used to be you had to win the first 2. This year you only have to win 1 and you get the third. So that should make more challenges happen in reality, because you don't have to hold on to it, which is interesting.
Very, very good point. Mike Malaguitar also asks, do you use beard oil? It's a very nice beard. I every once in a while I'll use a beard balm, which is like fine. I don't know, just wash it. I don't know, just do the basic stuff on a regular basis. you'll be fine. That's good life advice, just in general. Do the basics on a consistent basis, and you'll be okay for the most part in life. All right, that's enough of all of that. We are going to jump into some news. We'll start first with some Bills news, some very minor Bills news. Shane Buechele, thank you. He has a neck injury. He was quarterback 3 during this preseason game. He is going to be out for indefinitely. I don't think they gave an actual timeline for that. And as a result, the Bills also signed Ben DiNucci, who has been with the Cowboys and the Broncos, but hasn't really done a whole lot with either of those. And to be perfectly honest, doesn't really matter who QB3 is.
Doesn't at all. Not in any way does it matter. I mean, Ben DiNucci, a nice little Italian boy. I don't mind that at all. But other than that, this is really nothing to write home about. He'll play all of preseason game 3, and he'll be a practice squad guy if Shane Buechele can't come back. That's fine.
Yeah, and I mentioned this in my recap article after the game, which was I understand that there's frustration and annoyance with whoever QB2 is, and Mitchell Trubisky. This is his second time being the backup quarterback, and he is who he is, and he's not going to turn into anything different overnight or really ever, I don't think. But it doesn't matter because Josh Allen is not going to miss games. If there was a time when he was going to miss a game, it would have been when he not completely destroyed, but really messed up his elbow, his throwing elbow, and he didn't miss a single game from that season. Yeah. And if that's not enough to keep him out, I think you gotta have a major limb falling off type of thing happening in order for the backup quarterback to actually matter for this team. So I understand people get all worked up about it because you see more of the backup quarterbacks in the preseason than you ever do in the regular season, obviously, but it's not something I care about.
That's actually a phenomenal take that I've never thought about, is that everyone's like, well, you just need a guy that can carry you for 4 games and get you through 4 games and you'll be okay. But
they
to your
had
point,
that guy. That year, they had Case Keenum.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was fully expecting Case Keenum to start that Vikings game. And I was like, hey, he's been on the Vikings. That would be a nice story, too. Yeah. He's played with Stephon Diggs. It's not like this is some crazy thing to have happen. And then Josh Allen was like, nope, I'm playing. Doesn't matter. It's like if there was ever a time he was gonna miss a game, it would have been then, and he didn't. So I'm not gonna pretend that backup quarterback actually matters for this team.
The injury that would keep him out, the season's over. We don't have to talk. It doesn't matter anymore. If Josh Allen's not playing, something serious happened. He's not playing the rest of the season. Season's over. So let it be Ben DiNucci for all I care at that point. But Mitch Trubisky will be fine.
Yeah, it'll all be fine, and that's what matters. We're going to get into really the main story, the main NFL story of the day, which I find so perfectly juicy, so perfectly delicious, and so perfectly Jetsy. Haason Reddick, the former Eagles, Panthers, and Cardinals pass rusher, who was traded from the Eagles to the Jets for a conditional 3rd-round pick, has been holding out of training camp, or really holding in, right? Because you show up and then you don't get fined, but you don't actually practice, right? That's the whole thing. So he's been holding in, and now just straight up requested a trade, which is fascinating to me, because one would think that when you make a trade for someone who wants a new contract, like Haason Reddick does, that you make that trade with that in mind, right? You don't make the trade and be like, that's with that team. We'll just, we'll move on. It'll be fine. I don't know what those discussions were. I'm not part of Joe Douglas's front office. I'm not I'm not in the inner circle of Haason Reddick. I don't know what those conversations are like. But, man, if you're looking at this from the Jets angle, this is a really messed up, bungled situation from them.
Yeah, and Jordan Schultz reported, and to some extent, take every report you get with a grain of salt, but Jordan Schultz reported that they had made an offer to Haason Reddick prior to acquiring him. Haason Reddick said, "I don't like that offer," and the Jets said, "We'll trade for you anyway." So if that is true, which again, grain of salt, if that is true, the Jets kind of are getting what's coming to them with this whole situation. And it seems to me like Haason Reddick is to a point where he might be willing to pull a Le'Veon Bell style move where he's like, "I'm not playing for you guys. I'm not doing it." Especially with the tweet that the Jets had today. "You're going to play for us and you're going to like it." I was like, why would you do that? Why would you do that?
It was a pretty hard, definitive statement from the Jets once that report got leaked out. That's a lot. That is starting to become a genuinely contentious situation where with CD and Dak in Dallas, it's Dak is never going to be contentious, right? Unless he's genuinely being disrespected from the Cowboys, which I don't think is what's happening there. They're just, trying to figure out what's in their best interest. Even with CD Lamb, right? This is just sort of following the typical Cowboys negotiation tactics of just they like to negotiate through media. They like to basically do everything. They like to take their time. They like to do all the things you probably shouldn't do when negotiating contracts for players, but it's what they do. And I think it's more likely than not that they sign CD Lamb. I don't know if they extend Dak again. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But it seems I would be shocked if CD Lamb actually left the building. Yeah. But when we're talking about Haason Reddick, I mean, this is really contentious, and he's been on the team for a couple of months. Mm-hmm. This is really a bad look to have in the middle of training camp. And especially when you consider the fact that this Jets defensive line is not the same that it's been the last couple of years. They lose Bryce Huff, ironically, to the Eagles, who took him when they said, "All right, we're not going to have Haason Reddick this year, so we're going to have somebody else who's going to be a high-level pass rusher." And you still have Quinnen Williams, who is great.
Yeah.
But you also traded away John Franklin Myers. You're, I guess, really hoping that Will McDonald takes a step forward, which, maybe he does, but this defense, this style of defense that they run relies so much on having a deep, heavy, strong rotation on the defensive line. And if you don't have that, and especially at edge where they're probably more vulnerable than they are in the interior, this gets dicey in a hurry for the Jets.
Yeah. That becomes. I mean, it's kind of interesting because you look at the Jets and you look at edge right now. Even if they have Haason Reddick, I have questions about edge. I like Haason Reddick a lot, but Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald, those are guys. They could be. They have upside. They have really good upside, honestly, but as of right now, they're unproven. They're not really much there, not much to write home about there. And then you go look at safety, and it's Chuck Clark coming off an ACL injury, and Tony Adams, Ashton Davis. There's two legitimate weak points in this defense right now at edge and safety. And in that defense, it starts to make you a little bit nervous if you're a Jets fan. And as far as Haason Reddick goes, your point about the Cowboys, to some extent, there is the also I don't know, personal relationship factor that goes with it. CD and Dak have been in that locker room for a while now. They know those guys. To some extent, they're beholden to them, and they want to do right by them while also acknowledging that it's a business. Haason Reddick has no connection to New Jersey. He has absolutely none at all. He's looking at this team I don't care about any of you. Why should I care? So there's no part of him, I would presume, that's I need to be there for my guys. He doesn't need to be. So it makes this whole entire situation even more difficult, which on top of everything, I truly believe the Jets have a one-year window. If it does not work this year, everyone's getting fired. Like this, it's over. Rebuild everything. So that's Haason Reddick's. That's his, leverage that he controls. He doesn't control leverage on the contract and all these other things, but he also is aware, and his agent's aware, like they need him this year, and if they don't have him, they just lose their best pass rusher. This team that needs to win now probably isn't going to win now.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Is that this team needs to win now in order to prove that all the decisions that they've made leading up to this season have been worth it. Which, for the record, maybe it will be, right? But there's a good solid chance that it won't be. And we're starting to inch ever closer to that particular reality where this team is still talented. It's not like they're not talented, but this is starting to, honestly, between the way that the Jets have built this roster, the way that they've gone about extensions and this sort of thing, this drama off the field with Reddick, and having Nate Hackett. I'm sorry, is Doug Whaley running this team? Like,
No.
This is starting to get like real Doug Whaley type of vibes. Like, talented roster, knows how to scout, knows how to get these guys in, and knows kind of who to draft. But, we're making some real tough decisions at some really critical spots, and maybe this is not what they should be doing. Man. So, here's the most important question. Is Zach Wilson, is Zach Wilson Joe Douglas's E.J. Manuel in this particular comparison?
I don't even think it's fair to compare Zach Wilson to E.J. Manuel because E.J. was E.J. drafted, like 18th or something? Like,
yeah,
at least...
He was like the 16th, 18th overall pick
something
after
around
they
there.
traded back, which is a great sign, by the way, for faith in your quarterback.
Yeah.
Just like, yeah, we figured he'd be there after we traded back.
Yeah. Oh my God. When it comes to Zach Wilson, though, and this is the thing with Joe Douglas that's bothered me more than anything. He's been there for a few years now, and everyone's like, "Well, he makes great moves. He's really good drafting. He's really good at signing players." It's like, that's all great. How good have they been? How good have they been the past few years? They haven't been good. They've been bad at points. They've been 7-9 consistently, and you can blame that on Zach Wilson. But guess who drafted Zach Wilson with the number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft? Joe Douglas did it, and it is one of the greatest blunders in draft history. Like, he is on the bust, like Mount Rushmore, right up there with a Jamarcus Russell. So I don't get the Joe Douglas love because I've seen so many goof ups, and yet again, here's another goof up with Haason Reddick, an absolute disaster. At least right now, maybe it completely changes around, but right now, disaster.
It's getting to that point where, things are really becoming pretty bad for the Jets right now. And the season hasn't even started, which is pretty typical of the Jets. As C2L says, why sign Bird, Hamler, and Isabella chopping block? I mean, not to spoil what we're about to say for our takeaways of the preseason game, but it's not like either of those guys were really all that impressive. And Damiere Bird's been on NFL rosters before. He's played in pretty decent games. I don't know. Why not? It's fine. I'm not thinking too much of this one way or the other. Between like Damiere Bird and KJ Hamler and Andy Isabella, like, whatever. Pick one. It's not. I don't find that to be all that crazy one way or the other.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't even see this signing, so there's not much I
was
can
like
say.
30 minutes ago.
Okay. Yeah, so signing it's Damiere Bird. He's like 31 years old, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this is a nothing signing to me. But when it comes to the return game, I wish the Bills had a guy that I could say, oh, man, he's going to be a threat on the return, like a Braxton Berrios or obviously a Tyreek Hill, somebody like that. But they don't. That kind of stinks. I hope somebody kind of just appears out of nowhere in the next 2 weeks. But it's probably going to be Daquan Hardy or KJ Hamler, who I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later.
For sure. All right. I think that's enough for news.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just jump into this game. And do you want to just start with offense?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, let's do that. So, Josh Allen, despite our prediction last week on this show, did in fact play and start in this game. He went 2 for 3, 22 yards, 1 scramble for 7 yards. It wasn't all that interesting or great. They ran a couple of tackle wraps, which is such a staple of their offense now in the run game. The offensive line didn't really get a whole lot of push, but they did run a screen. I saw it. And not only was it a screen, it was like a really well-executed screen, too. Which was very exciting, and it was cool to see Curtis Samuel in that role. I liked that. Other than that, it was not a particularly interesting or good showing from the offense, from the starters, from the backups. It just wasn't very good.
Yeah. And for Josh Allen, the game plan was simple. It was get the ball into his hands and have him throw it right away as quick as you can, because you don't want him to be in danger. And then the second he scrambled, that essentially ended the game for him no matter what. I'm assuming Sean McDermott and Joe Brady saw that and they're like, all right, he's done, get him out of there. Not withholding the fact that the second quarter then came around, which I'm sure aligned with their plan, but you can't trust Josh Allen to protect himself in a preseason game, so you have to take him out. Josh looked fine. I'm perfectly content with the way he looked yesterday, or Saturday.
Speaking of which, you brought this up, and I know Eric brought it up. Josh Allen, in his Ozempic era, I kind of noticed it in training camp when I started to see pictures of him. I was like, he looks a little leaner, looks a little thinner. I was like, that's interesting, but I didn't see anyone else talk about it as something. And usually you hear someone mention it at some point. So I was like, maybe I'm just not paying attention or whatever. And then, immediately it was you and then Eric, and I was like, okay, so it's not just me. All right, let's talk about this.
Yeah, and it's also it's weird because somehow the weight of a quarterback is always news, like you said. This offseason in particular, Tua's weight was a big deal. He lost weight so that he could be more dynamic in the run game and escape pass rushers a little bit more. Same with Lamar Jackson, who apparently dropped weight to do the same thing. And then Josh Allen just flew under the radar as a guy that seemingly you can see that he lost weight. I didn't necessarily look at Tua or look at Lamar and they look significantly different. Josh looks different, and no one's talking about it because why would they? So I don't know why he probably chose to lose weight, but he did kind of imply that he took care of his body more this offseason than seasons prior, which is exciting.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. I'm kind of hoping someone asks him a question about that at some point. Here, looks like we have something. RJ Melville says, Josh said he changed his nutrition up this offseason with his Kay Adams interview. There you go. Kay Adams. Someone's doing their job, at least.
Speak of Ozempic. Right?
Speak of Ozempic. Former disgraced co-host Kyle Salagi says, I just got here. Did you guys already talk about the Bills' new fast boy? Yes, we did talk about Damiere Byrd. Former Carolina Panther Damiere Byrd was with the Panthers when Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott were there. So there, there's obviously overlap. Come on, I mean that was gonna happen. Mike Malik Guitar brings up a great point. Didn't the Chiefs go 0-4 in the preseason and then went on to win the Super Bowl? Listen, man, preseason just doesn't matter. The Chiefs probably weren't very good in the preseason. What was it? The 2008 Lions. They were 4-0 in the preseason, and then they went 0-16 in the regular season. Don't feed too much into it. I mean, the Ravens had this super long streak of preseason wins, and it's not like they were an unsuccessful team by any stretch, but it's not like they've really done a whole lot with it either. So it is what it is. It's good to see Allen just sort of looking more in shape. He's always been a big dude, right? That was always the appeal with him, is that he was just big, tall, strong, huge arm, and can run. But as you're in the NFL and you continue to work, I mean, the weight training program for an NFL team is probably pretty different than what you're getting out of the University of Wyoming, but it's also good to see that that all this talk talk, right, that we've heard of Josh Allen in the offseason, like getting back in the lab, working on mechanics, and, you know, all this sort of talk is actually real because you can actually see it. He looks leaner, his mechanics look cleaner, sharper, more put together. Like, all of that is just like, all right, there's a new focus now. I like this a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you 100%. Is a focused Josh Allen is an exciting and possibly better Josh Allen, so I'll sign up for that any season.
For sure. Kyle also says, former disgraced implies that I am no longer disgraced, and for that I am grateful. You're right, I did say that in the wrong order.
But if you put a comma after the former, doesn't it then...
That's a good point.
You'd think Kyle would know that.
That's hard to say in a sentence. So, like, maybe I should be like, former disgraced co-host Kyle Slack, or former disgraced co-host, something like that. We'll figure it out. We'll workshop that later. RJ also says the undefeated Pats in 2011? 2007 is when they went undefeated.
I don't
Anyway,
remember.
2011 or 2007 Pats went 0-4 in the preseason. Better teams tend to do worse because they're working on things. Mediocre teams tend to do better because they're game planning. Maybe, possibly. Some teams just find a way to win in the preseason, and it is what it is. Again, I'm not going to harp too much about the results of a preseason game. So we're going to move on to a different part of the offense. The offensive line. The offensive line definitely struggled. It wasn't just the first unit. It was the second and third units as well. Not great. Not great results. Not a great showing. And, again, I don't want to, like, raise alarms for something in the preseason. But it is a little odd that a unit that basically carried this team, especially down the stretch, just sort of came out looking flat and limpless.
Yeah, that was definitely one thing I noticed, and especially on like the first drive, the first time Josh Allen went under center, the quarterback center exchange looked a little off. There was a little delay; it wasn't smooth. And then there was that play where it looked like Deion Dawkins was pulling from the left tackle spot, and everything just seemed clunky. Like it wasn't going well. It wasn't timed right, and it just got blown up in the backfield. Those are all things, though, that I feel like you can clean up. The center quarterback exchange, I'm a little bit nervous about. The offensive line as a whole didn't play well, but I also don't care how Deion Dawkins plays in the preseason. Like, he can look awful. When the regular season comes, he'll turn it on. It's more, let me see how Cyrus Torrence and Spencer Brown have kind of progressed. Let me see Connor McGovern at center, and then David Edwards at left guard, whatever he can provide. But it was a little concerning, but it's definitely not time to raise alarm bells about the offensive line yet.
Yeah, and especially when you have Aaron Kromer as your offensive line coach, you know that he's not happy and he's going to do something about it. So I think it'll be fine. Mike Malley says, I thought Granger looked good, though, despite how bad the line looked. If there was a highlight, Granger definitely had some good reps for them. Which is good. And when you're talking about what the future might be at center, I mean, there were people that really liked Cedric Van Granger coming out of Georgia, but that he was just so limited and had to be a center. So it's good that he is already looking like he's taking things on, that he's in the position that he's in and doing what he needs to do right now. So that is a good development to see.
Yeah, and I think you have to take, I'm going to use this term again, take it with a grain of salt with Cedric Van Granger. He was playing against backups. So we haven't seen what he can do to the full extent against quality NFL players, but the snaps look crisp. It didn't look like the moment was too big for him. I'd love to see him with the second team this week, at least some snaps, because Alec Anderson at points didn't do what I expected a player like Alec Anderson to do, who's progressed through the system, who now has been with the Bills for a couple of years. Like, there was the one play where the entire offensive line didn't know what was happening because presumably Alec Anderson snapped the ball early. I wonder if Kromer sees those and likes what he saw from SVPG, and he's willing to push him up to the second team and give him some reps. Not saying take the role from Alec Anderson, but let's give him an opportunity. Maybe he excels there, and maybe maybe, just maybe, he finds his way into a bigger role with this Bills team than just a reserve center, which right now that's where he is on the depth chart. But we'll see. I thought he had a solid showing his first preseason game.
Agreed. Let's move on to these receivers. Since so much has been made about the Bills' receiving core this offseason, Curtis Samuel getting a screen was exactly the sort of thing that I wanted to see. There's a clip that I know Anthony and Eric have passed on Twitter of the Bills running mesh and then having a guy sitting over the top where the two guys underneath that are crossing each other clear out the space for the guy over the top, and that guy over the top ended up being Curtis Samuel. So I like seeing him being used in multiple spots in multiple ways. Obviously, you had Keon Coleman get his first catch, which ended up being a first down on a third down conversion. Good stuff. And they were definitely trying to get him a touchdown, right? Like there were a couple of tries in the end zone, and didn't end up happening. So be it. But it was overall, I felt like between that plus Shakir, I think was it Bruce? Was it Bruce who said like Khalil Shakir is exactly one step faster than you think he is, and that is such a perfect way to describe him on the field. It's just like he just has that one little bit of speed that you're not really anticipating from him. And so I thought all three of those guys showed something encouraging throughout this game. I don't think we saw much of Kincaid. I haven't looked at this game again.
One catch from Trubisky, but not too much of him though.
Yeah, I don't know if they were. I doubt that they were like, hey, we need to like double up on Kincaid early on. It's like I don't think that level of thought is going into this. Yeah. But maybe there is. Regardless, though, the other guys were showing things and doing things, and that was an encouraging thing to see.
Yeah, and I like that we kind of saw, to some extent, how at least I expect each of these players to be used this season. You know, Samuel, the jack of all trades, to some extent. Khalil Shakir can win underneath and win in the intermediate. Keon Coleman on the outside and in the end zone. Kincaid will do everything. Knox will be a seam guy. Each of these players kind of has a role with this team. And when you looked at Keon Coleman in the red zone, they are obviously trying to get him the ball. And Jalen Johnson was covering him, who is an all-pro caliber corner. So it's not like he was on some sort of scrub getting just easy, movement off the line. Like Coleman was challenging one of the better corners in the NFL, and he didn't make the catch. He looked a little bit like, kind of Johnson was beating him up at points. But it was good to see Coleman at least compete and play. And when Josh Allen's on the field, everything changes too, because Josh Allen will use his legs. He'll be mobile. He'll move out of the pocket. And that's going to put Coleman in advantageous positions. So all of those things to me, I look at these players and I'm excited about Khalil Shakir. I'm excited about Curtis Samuel. Excited about Keon. Like, the list goes on and on. I'm excited about all these guys because there is a specific role for them in this offense that I think they can excel at.
For sure. Like, there's definitely ways where each guy can be used, and if this is really going to be a quote-unquote everyone eats sort of offense, then that's how it has to be. And so far, that through this one game and kind of what we've heard throughout the preseason, it seems to be that the plan is in place, and they're doing everything they can to try and execute that plan. So that is encouraging. Just Tip Canoe, is this where the cool people are on YouTube? No, but we're happy to have you here anyway, so thank you for showing up. RJ also says, I was impressed with Coleman breaking up that would-be interception. That is a vet move. It's good to be able to have a young player recognize what's going on and do what he can to help out his quarterback. So always a good sign. Let's talk about Tyrell Shavers versus Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Not great from either of them. Mm-hmm. I feel better about Shavers than I do MVS, but that's not by a whole lot either, I would say.
Yeah, MVS had that, very blatant drop. Like, he should have caught the ball. Tyrell Shavers was thrown a little bit behind him where you can give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt, but I think these two are legitimately competing for a role on this team at this point, and neither kind of separated. And I have to wonder if, does MVS have a step in front of Tyrell Shavers simply because of the contract, simply because of his experience in the NFL, seemingly his relationship with Josh Allen. There's like the video of them when they're mic'd up, like hanging out, talking. I wonder if Shavers needs to literally prove that he is better than MVS, not just on special teams, which Shavers probably is better, but also as a receiver, as a kind of that emergency guy in this team. And to this point, Shavers hasn't proved it.
Yeah, and unless you are sort of clearly head and shoulders above that guy, and for all of the terrible play that MVS had during the regular season last year, he was so clutch in the postseason for the Chiefs, which was just so irritating and annoying. And you know what? If that's what it takes, like if you just want to stash MVS on your roster and then bring him out in January where suddenly he actually catches balls and does what he needs to do, I'm all for that. I'm all for winning in January. So, it's just it is what it is. And it's frustrating that these are the guys who are competing for wide receiver 5, right? Because I don't think that this team is going to keep 6 wide receivers. I'd be a little surprised if they kept 6 wide receivers.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's tough for me to make a real legitimately strong case for either one of these guys. But I'd like to, right? Like I'd like to be able to say like definitely keep Shavers over MVS or MVS over Shavers. Just like, I don't know, man. One of you guys has got to do something at some point.
Yeah, and I think that the point, like MVS showing up in the postseason, maybe that alone earns him this role because, like,
It might.
He had less drops in the postseason last year than Savon Diggs did, and he had more yards than him too. So who knows? I don't know. Maybe you just have to keep him away from going back to Kansas City, if anything else. And you can probably stash Tyrell Shavers on the practice squad. I don't know if he's going to get picked up elsewhere.
Kansas City, who is dealing with Hollywood Brown, who has a shoulder injury right off the bat. Who would have thought someone with his size and injury history might sustain an injury at some point.
You imagine the Bills traded Marquez Valdez-Scantling to the Chiefs, and all the nonsense Bills fans would have. I can't believe we gave them Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I can't believe it.
There's certain things where it's like I don't want them to happen in real life. I just want to like be able to peer into the reality, like the parallel universe where that does happen, just to see. I'm just curious. I'm a curious kind of person, I just want to take a look at it. Let's move on to Ray Davis, who had a few solid runs, which was good to see, especially considering that the offensive line did not necessarily do him a ton of favors. This is, again, sort of what we've heard coming out of training camp, was that Ray Davis is pretty much as advertised. This is a guy that's going to be able to complement Cook, that's going to come in and keep things going, and it's not going to be just sort of like, oh, James Cook is out, so they're going to be doing this, right? Like, it's going to be... Ray Davis is going to be a part of this team. He's going to be an important part of this running game and passing game, if we're being honest. So that was an encouraging thing to see for me.
Yeah, my big thing with Ray Davis was and I can't even remember the play exactly, but I remember he picked up a blitz perfectly. Like, picked it up. Oh, it was on Keon Coleman's first catch. A blitzer comes off the right side, and Ray Davis just blows that blitzer up. And that was great to see. Meanwhile, you go back and look at when Tremaine Edmonds blew through the line, James Cook was there and whiffed on that, and that's why Edmonds got in Allen's face. So those two things I look at, and I start to wonder, could Ray Davis start to eat more into James Cook's snap share than I originally thought? I expect him to eat pretty significantly into that share. I don't expect him to surpass the 50% mark. I still think James Cook is the guy. But if things like that keep happening where Davis is the considerably better blocker, maybe has better hands, they could probably, live with the idea of saying we could go with a little worse of a runner as long as we get better pass blocking and receiving with the way this offense is set up to work.
For sure. And it's just nice because they clearly tried to get a legit RB2 last year by bringing in Damian Harris and Latavius Murray. Harris obviously had the neck injury early on, and Murray just sort of kind of finally hit that wall past, what is he, like 34, 35 now?
Yeah.
Right, like he just finally hit a wall that he had been avoiding for a long time. So it was tough to just bring in two guys who were legitimately good that would have been good fits for this team, and neither of them ended up working out for different reasons. But now you have a guy. You have Ray Davis, who seems to be exactly who they want him to be, and that's really, really good. So I am happy with that. I think unless you have something else, I think that's it for the offense.
No, I think we're good for the offense, yeah.
All right, let's talk about the defense. So not great from the defense either. And some of this is tricky because even if you were to go back to the Bears of the regular season last year, it literally would not matter because it's a different offensive coordinator. It's a different quarterback with a totally different playing style. And so it's like, what do you even plan for? And especially from the Bills' perspective, who also have a new defensive coordinator who's new to calling defensive plays. It's a lot of newness going on when those two sides of the ball met each other on Saturday. So, some tough drives from them, but also they did hold up in the red zone, which I thought was encouraging, and especially against a quarterback like Caleb Williams, who, like, the red zone should kind of be his big thriving zone in a lot of ways because of his ability to run and to scramble and break contain and all that sort of stuff. So I thought that was encouraging, if nothing else. So there's definitely negatives to be taken away from this, and especially from the defensive line, which just straight up did not get any pressure.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that stuck out to me was the second I saw Caleb Williams start to boot out to the right, which they ran over and over and over again on us. My presumption, or my kind of the idea that popped into my head is like, the Bills maybe didn't expect it and also don't care. Like, they're not going to adjust live to that because it doesn't matter. Like, don't show your hand at all. Let the Bears do what they're going to do. Put your players in this game that doesn't matter in disadvantageous positions and see who wins and see who fails. And you're just scouting the individual matchups as opposed to the team. The Bears needed to do that with Caleb Williams because he needs to get his feet wet in the NFL. The Bills, the second Josh Allen scramble, that myself and probably most Bills fans and also Sean McDermott were like, don't do that, you idiot. You don't need to do that. This is your seventh year in the NFL. You're done with that stuff in the preseason. Caleb Williams had to. So the Bills defense, as much as it got kind of gashed at points when they were playing the ones, it was doing so against a team that was already in a bad position because the Bills didn't care to put them in a good position in this game. And they were without a lot of their starters. They were also mixing in the ones. Like, it wasn't just, oh, here's the first team defense. It was like, oh, Cam Lewis is with the first team defense, which he's not going to be. So I see all that. I'm like, hey, there's no reason to get all terrified about this. They only gave up 6 points to the Bears ones, and then the rest of the game was a disaster when the backups played the backups.
Right. Yeah, it is what it is, and obviously Ed Oliver getting banged up on the first play didn't help. Not having Daquan Jones doesn't help. It is what it is. Again, I'm not going to try and make so much out of this, but you also do want to see some better effort, some better coordination put together, some better cohesion from the defense as a whole, which I think that, it's not like the Bills came out of this saying like, oh, we're totally fine, everything will be fine, nothing bad happened, there's no war in Ba Sing Se. It's like they McDermott was pretty clear, like, we kind of need to be better all throughout. We need a much better effort than this, which is true. It's absolutely true. So I expect this week to be better overall from them, and I imagine starters on both sides will play again, and maybe they'll rest them in the third game. I don't know. I wasn't expecting them to play in the first game, so I don't know what the plan is anymore for the Bills and how they handle things, but it is what it is. Let's see. I felt I agree with this point that you kind of put into our show notes. Greg Rousseau, looking good. And I really hope he stays healthy this year.
Yeah, he looked good against both the pass and the run. Against the pass, he would have had a sack if it wasn't for a very blatant hold that ended up getting called.
Yes.
And then he had a couple good plays against the run where he just used his length. And again, that's him going against the starting right tackle, I think, on the Bears. I don't even remember who the starting right tackle is, but
I think it's Darnell Wright.
Darnell Wright, okay. Yeah, Greg Rousseau, to me, I want to see another step from him this year. He's in his 4th season. We already picked up the 5th-year option, but I want to see that next step where he goes from being like good and to some extent a run specialist to I don't expect elite, but let's get closer to great than we are to good. And this was a good sign, at least in the first preseason game.
Yeah, I think you need to be able to see something out of him that really makes you feel like this is a player that we can commit to long term. Because I like Greg Rousseau a lot, and I like what he brings to the table, but I wonder, I mean, what is a contract for Greg Rousseau going to look like? Because if he has a similar season where he's in that sort of like 8-ish sack range and is still really good against the run, I don't really know what the comfort level is in order to pay someone like that. If he breaks out like we think he's capable of, and I think last year he was well on his way to that type of season before getting hurt. You need to see it though. Like, that's the thing. You need to be able to see that from him. And thus far, it hasn't quite been that level of play as a pass rusher, and that's what you drafted him to be. You want him to be able to be as complete a player as he can, and if he does take a good step forward as a pass rusher, if he gets to that sort of 10, 11 sack range while still doing the things that he does against the run, I mean, you are looking at probably one of the most complete defensive ends in the NFL.
Yeah, right now, he kind of reminds me of a better version of Shaq Lawson to some extent, right?
Yeah.
Like early round draft pick, guy that excelled against the run, but never really put it all together as a pass rusher. I think you're right though. Like we know his quality as a edge setter. If he can just get to the quarterback more consistently and with more threat, if he hits that 10-11 sack mark, he's not going to be a Myles Garrett or TJ Watt, but I don't really think the Bills necessarily need that. If they have a complete defensive end on one side of the ball that they can start pushing up his snap share a little bit, I think that would be a huge boon for this team, not just for 2024, but for a few years from now as well.
For sure. I'm gonna pause here for a second because I'm getting an update on this Haason Reddick situation.
Oh.
This is from Diana Rossini of The Athletic. She said this on Twitter. I'm gonna quote exactly what she says. You can find her tweet afterwards, but this is what she says. Quote, "Trusted communication issues led to this situation between the Jets and Haason Reddick. Here's what I know. The Jets traded for Reddick knowing he wanted a contract adjustment. All teams interested in trading with the Eagles were told he wanted a new deal. Important information." That I didn't. Important information is my parenthetical, to be clear. Jets made a below-market offer before the trade. Reddick turned it down. The Jets moved forward with the trade without a deal in place. The Jets never made a new offer on a long-term extension because they say they were informed by Reddick's rep that he would play under his current contract. That is not the players' side of the story. Reddick's camp believes that the Jets said they would do a deal and trusted this would get done by training camp. A few weeks ago, the Jets called and said they would be willing to rework a deal, the current deal, if he showed up. From the players' side of things, that's not what they agreed to before the trade, so he didn't show. Now trust has been broken by all. End tweet. This is phenomenal stuff. Absolutely phenomenal. And honestly, Lauren here could not summarize this any better and more succinctly. Jets, 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 Jets. Oh, man. What a situation they get themselves into.
You gotta love the Jets. Gotta love the Jets.
Beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. Going back to our previous programming, RJ says Groot has always looked like Jason Pierre-Paul for me, even in college. That's not a bad comparison, actually. They're both kind of these really long, leaner. I mean, Pierre-Paul was big. I think he was bigger than Groot is, but I do think that that's a good comparison. They just have this crazy length. Oh, we lost Uber. That's okay. I'm sure he'll be back in a bit. Yeah, he just has this crazy long length and good strength, has been solid against the run. I do think that Pierre-Paul was better as a pass rusher early on in his career than Rousseau has been, but I do think that capability is there for Greg Rousseau as well. All right, we are going to move on to Kaiir Elam. So, Elam is, again, somebody who has played well during the portion of training camp, right? We've heard all the reports about him. He's playing well. He seems to be taking to the new changes on the coaching staff well, to the new changes on the defense pretty well. So that's a good thing. And it seems like in this game, he stuck his nose in there in run defense, particularly when the drive that started on the Bears' 4 or 5 yard line, wherever it was, just getting himself in there and involved in run defense. He didn't seem like he was out of place. He seemed like he was where he was supposed to be. And I feel confident in saying that because my timeline was not littered with people saying, OMG, why do they still have Kaiir Elam? OMG, Kaiir Elam looks rough again, blah, blah, blah. It was like, all right. So he's doing what he is supposed to be doing. And right now, that's what you need to see from Kaiir Elam. You need to be able to see him doing what he's supposed to be doing what he's being coached to do. And I think that now that there's a certain level of trust between him and the coaching staff, where I'm not so sure there was that beforehand, I do think that this is going to be a good situation for him. I'm talking about Kaiir Elam.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What did you think of Elam on Saturday?
Yeah, sorry, getting back into it. Just real quick, I'll say this. Don't open Spot Rack in the middle of a show because it'll crash StreamYard somehow. So that's what happened right
Shocker.
there. Use Over the Cap. Anyway, so as for Kaiir Elam, I thought he looked great. And I am being, I guess, cast as one of his biggest haters on Twitter, which I am not. I don't hate Kaiir Elam. I just have other thoughts on the cornerback position. That being said, Elam looked really good in this preseason game, and I didn't like that it was more than just he looked good in pass coverage. He came up and made a tackle at the line of scrimmage, which was really good to see. So you see him at multiple levels, and you're like, he's a willing tackler. He's playing a little bit better in coverage. There wasn't a big hiccup where, he dragged somebody down because he got beat. So I think if you look at this game, you have to think, well, that's a really good sign for Kaiir Elam, and let's see what he can keep doing the remainder of the preseason.
Yeah, it was exactly what you needed to see from him. You needed to see just him doing his job, doing his 111th, doing what he needed to do, doing what he's being coached to do. That's what needed to be seen from him. If he keeps doing that, if he keeps on trusting the process, doing that sort of thing, I think that we'll start to see a bit of resurgence in Kaiir Elam's stock. And that'll be a very, very good thing moving forward for this team. Let's see. Let's talk about. We talked about defensive line, so I'm gonna point out the two rookies on the defensive line. DeWayne Carter actually led Bills defenders with 34 snaps in this game, which was impressive. It's not surprising. I think we mentioned this last week that we both expected DeWayne Carter to get a lot of snaps, kind of showing what he was doing in training camp and getting opportunities both with the first and second team units. So that made sense. And it was good to see him get a lot of reps and being involved, and again pushing back on the whole Sean McDermott doesn't like or play rookies a whole lot. It's just like he does, and this is going to be yet another example of this.
Yeah, and when it comes to the regular season, and DeWayne Carter plays, let's say, 35% of the snaps, probably something like that, which is around Tim Settle's number on the past couple of years. I think you're going to have people saying, like, I can't believe he's not playing. Yeah, because he's behind Ed Oliver, who should be playing around 70% of the snaps. So I think you're going to see more of DeWayne Carter than probably, I don't know if the right terms you should, but like they're going to play DeWayne Carter, and this preseason is the perfect time to get him experience and get him ramped up to be ready to rotate in when Ed Oliver needs a breather.
100%. And Javon Solomon, who was the 6th round pick, one of those?
Fifth or sixth, yeah.
5th round, yeah. Flashed, I felt like, a couple of times throughout that game, kind of with the same sort of move, kind of trying to hit the corner and work around the edge underneath, which is fine. That's who he is. Like, he's going to be this speed rusher off the edge, but I liked what I saw from Javon Solomon. My concern with Javon Solomon, at least initially, was like, is what he does, is how he wins in college really going to work in the NFL? And again, he's working against backups, but that's how you need to start. That's how you need to be able to move forward. You need to be able to go against the guys that you're going with and win the way that you need to win. And that was an encouraging thing for me, at least.
Yeah, and on top of that, today, Sean McDermott had an interview where he called him Sully. So he already has a nickname for the guy, which it seems to insinuate to me that this may be a bigger deal than people are choosing to believe at this point in time. Maybe Javon Solomon has endeared himself to the head coach and endeared himself to this team. And after the first preseason game, I think it was a general opinion among most Bills fans that, like, he played really well to a point where you start to think, well, what could he do in the future? That's not to say he's not going to be a 10-sack guy this year. Like, that's not going to happen. But maybe he is a part of this rotation. Maybe he isn't just a weekly inactive guy. But I think the roster, it's firmly in Javon Solomon's sight at this point.
For sure. Ralph Wilson Sr. says the Jersey Jets are built by Boeing.
That's good.
I'm gonna use
That's
that
really good.
moving forward. Someone with better Photoshop skills than me should figure out how to do something with that.
Like the door blown off and Haason Reddick just standing there.
Aaron Rodgers as the pilot. RJ says Kyrie Elam has more postseason interceptions than Trey White. I still think Elam has corner one potential. I think that's possible. I think that's very possible for him. Just got to be able to put it together, man. Just got to put that together. Leon Davis says, enjoying the show. Thank you. Any thoughts on Epinesa? I feel like he hasn't stepped up to the level we need. He's flying under the radar. I think at the end of the day, Epinesa is a player that's good to have in your rotation. He's a good, solid, like, third, in a super ideal situation, like, fourth guy in your rotation. You know what I mean? I don't think he's ever going to be like an edge 2 type of guy. I think it's possible, but I don't know. He played well last year, and it was good to see him playing well and playing consistently last year. And I do think that if Von Miller is healthy and returns to a certain level of what we've seen from him, not even like what we saw from 2022, but even like 80%, literally anything from Von Miller would be better than what they got from him last year, right? Like literally anything. But having him plus Rousseau, and then I think that in itself just sort of helps A.J. Epinesa and what he's able to do, and him being sort of an efficient edge player rather than having to rely on him as a not every down type of player, because that's not how the Bills play their defensive line, obviously. It's not how most teams play their defensive line, obviously. But just somebody that you can rely on and be efficient as a defensive end there.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because we brought up Greg Rousseau and like how good of an edge defender he is, and we need to see a better pass rush from him. With A.J. Epinesa, it's a little different. He's a really good like ball batter, I guess. I don't know the right terminology. Like, he's great with his hands at the defensive line. He led all defensive line or DNs in batted balls last year, which is incredible considering his snap share. He's an okay pass rusher and an okay run stopper. So you have those two okay, but he's good against the kind of the quick pass. I actually think he works really well against a player like Tua. You line him up over the right tackle and trust that AJ can get his hands up and bat a ball on those, quick timing-based throws. But yeah, he's never going to be TJ Watt. And the Bills don't have a player that is of that caliber or that domination at edge. Obviously, you love that, but they don't have it. So they have to win with the aggregate, and AJ Epinesa is a part of that, and hopefully Von Miller is too this year.
For sure. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how all that shakes out, for sure. Joe DeRosa says, I haven't finished watching, but he had a few nice reps. I liked seeing him adjust to some of the doubles he faced. I'm guessing this is about DeWayne Carter, because DeWayne Carter has been Joe's guy since before they drafted him. RJ says Stevenson's play was absolutely amazing for his first football game he has ever played in. This is Gable Stevenson, who was the wrestler that they brought in, and has kind of become the pet project of Sean McDermott, which whatever, it is what it is. I'll be the first to admit that I wasn't necessarily dialed in by that particular point of the game, but again, this is something where it's if he were being totally blown off the ball or looked like he didn't belong, I would have seen that, right? I would have just seen that on the timeline, on somewhere, but the fact that we didn't is okay, maybe there's something here. And he was somebody that I projected to the practice squad for this year. Yeah, I don't know what other team is going to be interested in picking him up, so that seems like a pretty safe bet for me.
Yeah, that's his upside, is the practice squad, but in 2024, and if everything goes perfectly, maybe he competes for a roster spot in 2025, but that's not this season. You can't just pick up football and suddenly be that good. I understand he's an elite athlete that won a gold medal in a sport that has a lot of connections to football to some extent, but no, he's not going to be starting for the Bills this year, playing on the active roster.
No, and that's fine. That's fine. He doesn't have to be. Talk briefly about Cam Lewis. Cam Lewis, been on this team for a while. Has some nickel safety sort of versatility, long-time special teams guy. Was very involved with the second and even with the first team defense. So this is just somebody that's been on this team forever, has all sorts of trust from the coaching staff. It's not surprising. Every year I kind of wonder, is this when they're going to move off from Cam Lewis? And every year I have to remind myself, it's not going to happen. Cam Lewis will be a Buffalo Bill for as long as this regime is going to be here, and that's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, they always have to have one of these guys too, right? Like a Cam Lewis, a Dane Jackson, those type of players where it's they're NFL players. That's what they are. They're not great, but they're NFL players, and they fill out your roster, and that's what Cam Lewis is. In this game in particular, I thought he played pretty damn well. I just want to know what that penalty was, and I haven't gone back to watch the all-22. He had the illegal hands, and when they showed the replay, they showed somebody different, and they're there's nothing that happened over there. And meanwhile, you can see Cam Lewis just having great position on, I don't remember if it was Keenan Allen or DJ Moore or Roma Dunze, one of those guys. Just made a great play, and the ref's just nah, that's a flag. Why, I don't know. So
very fair. Let's see. Justin Tippecanoe says, I think the next Olympic signing we need to make is one of those break dancers. No.
If I never see her again, I'd be so happy.
What? I just, it's one thing to add something like breakdancing to the Olympics, but can they at least be good? I don't. Man, just. Anyway, agreed. The Bills do need to sign an Olympic break dancer. Let's see. Ralph Wilson Sr. from the grave says, only way I would notice Stevenson is if he wore a singlet out there. I have absolutely no comment about that. Walter S. says the penalty was on Dorian Williams, not on Cam Lewis.
So maybe they just miscalled the number, is what they could have
Let me
done.
check with my producer on that, because I don't necessarily remember a penalty on Cam Lewis. It might have been on Dorian Williams. Yes, I agree to terms. Blah blah blah. Every time with this, it's ridiculous. I really am just sort of stalling and vamping until I'm able to find exactly what I'm looking for. Let's see.
I should probably help here.
Oh, that's fine. I'm already here. Don't go. Okay. Yep. Here we go. Okay. So it was the first drive on 3rd and 6. Penalty was called illegal contact on Dorian Williams. So shout out to you, Walter.
Good call.
Thank
Good
you
call. All right,
for
that makes me
pointing
happy.
that out. Appreciate it.
Good.
Appreciate it. We love getting fact checked when it's actually factually correct. That is
true.
actually helpful. So thank you for that. Any other standouts for the defense for you that you can think of?
Terrell Bernard looked good. Like everyone I wanted to look good, and I thought DeMar Hamlin made a solid play on the right side of the field. People are all up in arms about Taylor Rapp when they had the long run on the left side, and Taylor Rapp got turned around there.
The screen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
None of these things are concerning to me. It's not real football until it's real football. I just, you look for the flashes from the players you don't expect, and I think we saw a couple of those from guys that I was excited to see it from.
For sure. I know you have thoughts about special teams.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna defer to you to lead this off.
First, I should give my Jack Browning eulogy now that he's a part of the Baltimore Ravens. Don't the Baltimore Ravens have who's their punter? Ryan
They
Stonehouse or
drafted
something?
a punter
Yeah.
this year, right?
Okay, so we'll get Jack Browning back here as soon as they cut him. Until then, we have to live with Sam Martin, who had one really good punt and then just did Sam Martin things, which is boring and not fun, which I guess to some extent I don't ever want to see him punt because that means the Bills aren't punting, but Sam Martin. The one thing I did want to talk about, so Tyler Bass, 2 of 2 on kicks, one of them from 49 yards. I don't know if you were the same way as me, but on both of the kicks, I held my breath. I was like, oh my God, he missed it. He's going to miss it. And I don't like this feeling because it's awful to not trust your kicker. And I never really felt that way with Tyler Bass. And now I feel that way in a preseason game. Wait till the regular season when he's trying to kick a game winner. I'm going to have to leave the room. I don't know. It's nerve-wracking that's how I feel.
So the first kick, which was a short kick, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, I'm not going to... I know he can make these kicks. That's not what I was concerned about. Even going back to like what we've been hearing out of training camp is like, I don't think there's really been like consistently missing kicks from short range, like 30, 35 yards or below that, right? Like, I don't think that's what the problem is.
Yeah.
The problem is the 45 to 50 yard plus range, which in previous seasons was about as automatic as it could get with Tyler Bass, and now it's not. So I was nervous for the 49 yarder because that was like right on the edge, and it did just sort of squeak through that upright. But a kick made is a kick made, and I think hitting both of the field goals that he was asked to make, is a good sign. It's where I want to start. That's like, let's start here and let's work our way through this. That is something that I do want to monitor throughout this preseason because I do think it is a concern. It's something worth tracking and following throughout the preseason because that is something that can legitimately translate from preseason to regular season, right? Like, unlike some of these other things where everything else is so dependent on scheme that you're running versus scheme that they're running and how that's all executed with your 1s and 2s and whatnot, this is more translatable and it's a good thing that he hit both of his kicks and accounted for 100% of the Bills' points on Saturday, which is its own problem, to be sure.
Yeah.
Ralph Wilson Sr. says the wind was definitely a factor, so hopefully it's a salve to his psyche. And you know what? Yes, the wind was a factor. It was surprisingly windy in Buffalo in August, like almost mid-August, but that's also a part of kicking in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Right? And so that is another encouraging part of this, right? Is that despite sort of unperfect conditions, he managed to hit both of those kicks. I don't want to say without any problems, but it was they were both made, and I feel good with having that be the starting point. Hopefully that continues.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said that he did it in Buffalo, which if there's a place he's going to feel more pressure than anywhere else, it's going to be Buffalo, because he knows how the last season ended. Like, that's not going to affect him as much if he's playing in, say, Atlanta or something like that. Like that what doesn't matter there. Those fans don't care. These fans care. He definitely feels that. And for him to hit both of these in this random preseason game or worthless preseason game, maybe to Ralph Wilson Sr.'s point, maybe this is a boon for his psyche heading into the season.
And a lot of kicking is based around the mental game.
Yeah.
It just is, because it affects your mechanics so easily, and you got to be able to focus in and lock in when you have to. So I think this is a good first start for Tyler Bass this preseason, and hopefully that continues. We'll see what happens. New kickoff rules obviously did not really lead to anything all that substantial or exciting for either side, which is fine. Again, we talk about, like, you know, schematics and not showing your hand a whole lot. I am hoping, praying, nay, begging that week 1 of the regular season for the NFL unleashes, like, every special teams coordinator just gets to go into their bag and be like, oh, we get to do this. We finally get to do this. And everyone just runs whatever crazy thing they can right off the bat. But we'll see. At the very least, it wasn't very exciting for this particular game.
I'm genuinely nervous for the NFL in that regard. I feel like if this becomes too overpowered, and I think there's some teams uniquely that can have it be overpowered. Like, I look at the Dolphins, for instance. That team is built to dominate the kick return. Like, they could put Tyreek Hill back there, and I don't know what you do. Like, if it's blocked even remotely well, he's going to run in for a touchdown multiple times a game. Like, it's perfectly fit for him and a couple other players in the NFL, which is great for those teams. My fear is if you start to see it get out of hand, where you have teams that are, you know, averaging 2 of them a game, which I think when you have those superstar quality returners, that could end up happening. And if it makes it into the regular season as it is today, the NFL can't change the rule mid-season. Like, I just can't fathom them ever doing that. That's why I was kind of hoping in the preseason we'd see fireworks from lesser return men, so the NFL could be like, whoa, wait a minute, this isn't going to work out really well for us. But seemingly so far it hasn't happened, because really the guys that are returning the ball aren't returning the ball right now. And for the Bills, they don't have any of those superstar guys, though, which also stinks. So it's either KJ Hamler or Daquan Hardy, neither of whom really did much in this particular game.
Yeah, it is what it is. And I think we talked about this earlier, that, you know, the Bills at this moment don't really have a guy that produces a lot of excitement from the return game, which is unfortunate, but we'll see what happens. Maybe Daquan Hardy turns into something, and they're just kind of saving that, but whatever. It is what it is. All right. Anything else before we get out of here? Do we want to talk about this upcoming preseason game against the Steelers? I don't even know what to say with that. Like, good for Russell Wilson for winning another quarterback job, I guess.
Dude, well, that's what happens when Justin Fields is, you know, your competition.
Man.
I mean, the only thing I guess I'd bring up is, like, I am a little nervous about this joint practice. I don't like joint practices, so they do make me nervous. And especially if you have some bad blood that boils over into the game, and then maybe somebody hits a player a little harder than they should in the preseason. That makes me nervous. But I think my main thing again is it's preseason. It's not a big deal. The Bills could go 0-3, and it's not really going to change my opinion heading into the season as long as everything else kind of stays the way it is. Let's get to that Arizona game. And in the meantime, hopefully we find some diamonds in the rough like a Javon Solomon. Maybe he continues to play well, or Cedric Van Prank Injured. But other than that, no, I don't really think there's too much to dive into with this upcoming Steelers game.
Fair enough. I am gonna tend to agree. Honestly, this is just one of those where it's like any other preseason game, right? At least to me, where it's just like I need to be able. It's hard for me to preview anything because it's like, what do we know about these teams?
Yeah.
But just gotta take it as it comes, and we will see what happens. So, I think that's gonna be it for us, folks. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are always happy to have you out here and commenting and talking and interacting with us. It is a great part of what we do here. If you enjoyed this part of the Cover One Roundup and this sort of thing in general, consider subscribing to One Pass. It is our most direct way to support us. $60 a year. It is the best Bills content you will ever get, along with a community of people in our Discord that you can talk to about pretty much anything: video games, TV, music, food. If you're a Bandits fan, if you really love lacrosse, if you love being tortured by professional sports more in Buffalo, there's a Sabres channel. There's all sorts of stuff for all the types of people that come in and are fans of the Bills and support us here at Cover One, and we are grateful to each and every one of you. Another great way of supporting us is by hitting that like button below, hitting subscribe on this channel, hitting subscribe on Cover One Fantasy, and sharing this video with your friends, enemies, lovers, and neighbors. It is a great way to support us. We are very grateful to all of you for being out here. Uber, where can the people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at UberHansen, always tweeting some nonsensical things. And this week is the third part of my AFC's preview series that'll come out on si.com/NFL/Bills. I'll be covering the New York Jets. Let me say it better this way: the Haason Reddick-less New York Jets in this week's preview. So that'll probably be around Thursday this week. So si.com/NFL/Bills, which David also writes for.
Yes, I do. And you can find me at DFAUXY or at DFoxy on Twitter. I also write for SI.com and do recaps. I'll be doing a post-game recap after each game this year, as I've done with Cover One for the last couple of years, and I'm looking forward to doing again. So with all of that being said, folks, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you all next week, hopefully after a Bills preseason win, or at the very least, a game in which they don't look like total ass. So thank you all for joining us. We will see you all next week. Bye-bye.